welcome wherever you are. Today I'm going to do a quick video on how to install Microsoft SQL Server and also the MS SQL Server Management Studio. So let's make a start with installing SQL Server on your computer. And the reason why you might want to install one locally for testing purposes, that's exactly what I shall be using it for. So first of all, we need to find the SQL Server website. So I'm going to type in SQL Server and I'm going to look for the developer version. So I'm going to do SQL Server Developer, and sure enough, it's in SQL Server Downloads, which is Microsoft. It is the Microsoft version I am going to be downloading. So I should click on that. Now what it will do is it'll introduce you to three options. You've got SQL Server on Azure, SQL Server at the edge, and SQL Server on premises. It's none of those that I want. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to scroll down the page, and we've got both Developer and Express. Now Developer is free to use and should be more than adequate for what you want to use. The issue you might have is the license that it comes with, so please check the license before you download it. Further to that, you've also got the SQL Server Express, which is kind of a slimmed down version of Developer. Now I'm just going to click on the download now and let it download, and it doesn't take long because I'm only downloading the opening section, and I'm going to just go for the basic. So select basic installation type to install the SQL Server database engine feature with default configuration. I don't want to play around with it. I just want to make this simple, and I kind of expect you guys to as well. By all means, have a flick through the license terms. I'd be very irresponsible to tell you to skip that. So accept that. Make sure you know where you're installing it. I'm installing it on my main drive, and I'm just going to hit install and let it go through its paces. Now this shouldn't take too long, but I will speed it up if I need to. Okay, so now it's actually downloaded, I can check the file locations for everything. So here we've got the connection string, we've got the SQL Server install log folder, the installation media folder, and also the installation resources folder. So now what I need to do is just make sure I can get a connect. So I'm going to do that. And what happens on my other screen, I get a little command prompt coming up to show me that that seems to be okay. And finally, I'm going to install the SSMS. Okay, so the SQL Server Management Studio. Now I click on the link because it takes you straight to the latest version. So I'm going to download that now. Try not to download this because that just takes you back to the page that we were just on. So I'm going to click on this button here. Let it download. Now this is a slightly larger file because this actually contains the information for the SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. So let's wait for that to install. When you install SQL Server Management Studio, you also install Azure Data Studio, which is kind of a slimmed down version of the SSMS that we'll be using. So now that I've actually downloaded the SSMS, I'm not actually going to install it at this point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Customize to customize my SQL Server. Let's wait for that to come up. The reason why I'm doing this is there might be some installations that needs to be set up within Windows, and that might require me to reboot the computer. So I shall do that as needed. Okay, so all the check marks are there. There is a warning on my Windows firewall. I'm going to ignore that. So we're just going to go to Next. I'm going to perform a new installation of SQL Server 2022. One of the things that I would suggest is make sure that you've got the disk capacity to run SQL Server. Now you can use the C drive, or you can transfer it to a secondary drive. But if you do transfer it to a secondary drive, make sure you tell the software where that information is. I'm going to keep everything on my C drive. But as I said, make sure you've got everything you need. Now, this is the instance here. Okay, so this is the instance ID that it's going to create. This is the name of the server that I'm going to use, and it's going to be featuring the SQL engine, which is a developer edition, running 16.0.1.0006. Okay, now again, you might need to update that at some point, or you might have a different version when you install your version. So I'm going to hit next. It's the developer edition, so I don't need to fill in any of these details. So I'm going to hit next. I'm going to accept these terms because I've already read them. Now this is a screen that some people get thrown by. All you need to do is just make sure you click on that button up there. That makes sure that you are not running the Azure extension for SQL Server. As you can see, it says here, to install Azure extension for SQL Server, provide your Azure account or a service principal to authenticate the SQL Server instance to Azure, and then blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to do that, so I'm just going to simply disengage that and hit next. Right, okay, so these are all the sort of things that you can install. Now I'm going to just hit select all and let them all get installed. So I'm going to literally have everything that I need. The instance root directory is going to go here. So it's going to go into my program files and Microsoft SQL Server. The shared feature directory is also going to the same location. And the shared feature directory, x86, is going to go into my program files x86. Okay, so I'm going to hit next. Okay, so in this section, I'm going to set a named instance. So I'm just going to call this MS SQL Server Dev. Actually, I'm going to call that one Dev as well. So the named instance is MS SQL Server Dev, and the instance ID is going to be MS SQL Server Dev as well. Hit next. Okay, that's the port range I shall be using. So 16450 to 16460. I'm fine with that. Okay. Grant performance, volume maintenance task privilege to. I'm going to ignore that for this moment. I believe you can make changes to this later on if you need to. So I'm just going to hit next. Now at this point, you might decide that you want to have your own password or whatever. Because I'm installing this on my computer, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use Windows authentication mode. So I'm just going to simply say add current user, it's me. So that should come up on my screen. There you go. And then I'm going to hit next. I'm not really that bothered by this section, so I'm just going to stick with tabular mode. But again, I'm going to make sure I have my current user added. There you go. And make sure the port number is okay. It's going to create a new SSL certificate. So I'm just going to say, yeah, okay. This is the URL setup here. So I'm going to hit next. And it's saying everything's been put in place. This is where it's all going to go. Do I want to go ahead? So I'm going to say, yeah, install. And now it'll actually build the server itself now. So she'll just wait for that to finish. Okay, so once you've installed it, it's always a good idea to scroll down just to make sure that everything has succeeded, and it sure enough has. So I can say close. Okay, so now that we've actually downloaded and installed the SQL Server, now I'm going to install the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And as I said before, this will also install the Azure Data Studio. So let's hit install and see how we get on. Okay, so that's all done now. So it's now asking me to restart the computer. So I'm going to do that and I'll come right back. So now that we've successfully rebooted, I'm going to open SQL Server Management. So I'm just going to type in SQL, and there it is, SQL Server Management Studio. I'm going to run that. Okay, so as you can see, we've got it fired up. You'll see also that we've got database engine. I've also got the server name, which also includes the MS SQL Server Dev. It picked that up from the previous installation, so that's all good. We're going to be using Windows Authentication to open it, so let's see if we can connect to it. Okay, so during this process, it's actually going to try and connect to the server that's running in the background. You don't have to do anything with the server. It should automatically fire up the moment you log into your Windows. So let's see what happens. Okay, there you go. So it's now successfully installed. I can actually go into there. Now, I haven't actually got anything in my databases at the moment because I've not installed anything. But that is how to install MS SQL Server and Server Management Studio software. I've also got Azure running on here as well. So Azure Data Studio. Okay, so here is Azure Data Studio, and that's got some little ready bits there. What's that say? Preview. Yeah, I'll have that. I don't need to read that at the moment. So if you want to use Azure Data Studio instead, you need to go to New, and it's New Connection. And then you'll need to put in all the details over here. Now, thankfully, in my SQL Server Management Studio, I've got all that information here. So what I'll do is, it's this line here I want to use. Can I copy it? Is it going to let me? Nope. So I'm going to have to type it in. Actually, there is another way of doing it. So if I just disconnect, I connect again. I got the whole server name there. So I'm just going to copy that, Control C. And then I'll go into here and Control V. Oh, it's asking me if I want to do an update. I'm not going to do an update at the moment. I'll do it later. And we're using Windows Authenticator, so I shouldn't need to fill in any other bits of information. So I'm just going to hit connect. I'm going to enable it to trust, and there you go. I've now connected to the server. So as you can see, it's quite easy to use. This is a slimmed down version of the Server Management Studio. So if you're running a computer with less memory, you might want to use the Azure Data Studio instead. What I will say is there are some really useful tools in SQL Server Management Studio that that aren't included in Azure Data Studio. But I do know that they are actually making some updates with Azure Data Studio. So it's a matter of just watch this space. Now, I will show you how to use both these tools in follow-up lessons. If you got something out of this, give me a thumbs up. All those likes helps this channel get recognized. Also, don't forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I will be posting some more videos in the near future. And by all means, leave a comment at the bottom. I tend to respond to those comments, so if you've got any questions you want to ask, pop a quick question in the comments section. And I've got plenty more videos if you want to have a look at those, so please check out my channel. All right, until next time, I'll see you again. Cheerio.